So what I loved about that is it goes from modern loneliness, this idea of loneliness, probably non-modern loneliness or traditional loneliness is you're isolated, you're separated away from people. But this idea of modern loneliness is that we're never alone. We're so connected. We have people all around us, but I've never been more depressed. What's up, everybody? This is Josh from Practical Theism. I had a kind of a spur of the moment thing that I thought would be a really good thing to talk about. And it's regarding a song, actually. Some of you may or may not know the kind of up and coming pop artist. His name is Lauv. I think I pronounce it Lauv. It's L-A-U-V. So not love. I think it's Lauv, right? He had a few hit songs that kind of came out a few years ago. Some really catchy melodies. Things like I like me better when I'm with you. I like me better when I'm with you, right? And he's got that, I won't say it, there's a superlative in there, but I'm lonely. So you have these songs that are really kind of based around like relationships and relational thing. But he released a new song the other day, and it's called Modern Loneliness. And I was listening to it on the way home, and I was like, man, I really got to make a song about that. Or not a song. I should make a song about it. I really got to make a video about that because he's a very talented writer, and he kind of has a really clear way and concise way of communicating through his music and his lyrics about these really kind of deep interpersonal human emotions. So there were some really interesting themes that tie right into kind of the Christian message and the Christian thing, if you will, that I think we've lost today. And I love the title of the song, Modern Loneliness. Modern Loneliness. Now, obviously, as a songwriter, I'm sure he had full intention and a full idea of exactly what he was intending to write, what he was intending to communicate. And I think that one of the beauties of music is it can be interpreted in so many different ways. And so this is kind of like my take on this song. And I think it's hitting, like I said, on some really kind of foundational Christian principles and things that we've just kind of lost in modern culture. I was having a great conversation with a friend not too long ago regarding just kind of like the state of Christianity around the world, how modern Christianity looks in America, modern evangelicalism versus how more orthodox traditional Christianity looks abroad. And you kind of see almost this dulling or this muteness in kind of some of the Christianity abroad that is sensing and surging for this revival, but it's kind of old hat. You go into these cathedrals. As an American, I go into these cathedrals in like Rome and in Europe, all over. And you're just like, wow, you look at the majesty of these things. And we're so jaw-dropped at their beauty. But a lot of Europeans, they're not jaw-dropped. In fact, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, this old thing. So I think we've lost some of the sense of the beauty and the majesty of the Christian message, especially in Western culture. Because on the Western culture side, we've lost a bit about what the gospel initially was intended and not just intended for, but the real kind of raw wellspring of the gospel. So this person I was talking to, she had been a missionary and done some missionary work abroad and did that for a number of years. She was actually working in the slums. And so I asked her, and she was like telling me about objection handling and things like that. And I asked her, I said, what's kind of the number one objection to kind of God or Jesus that you see in the slums with somebody who's just really like doesn't have any kind of the luxuries that, we've come to just be so immune to the fact that we have these luxuries out here. Somebody who's like down in the slums, they have a kid that they didn't want a kid, but they end up having a kid. It was interesting. She said the number one objection is not too uncommon from some of the atheist objections to Christianity and to kind of theistic religion. He said that they would say things. The number one objection she said was like, can't believe in God, I can't square like God with the fact that there's so much evil, hurt, suffering in the world. Like, why am I down on my luck here? And I thought about that, and then it contrasted with this song so well, because it's like, we talked about, what do you do in that instance? You have somebody, you can't just talk about them. You don't talk about just theological principles. You don't talk about theology with them necessarily. You can't talk about doctrines or dogmas or anything like that. And I think it's in those moments that you get a real true sense of what the Christian message really is. It's not this like super complex philosophical understanding that can be expounded. And I think there's a beauty in that, the ability that it can expand the intellect and expand the knowledge to really understand the deeper, the deeper meanings and reasons, if you will, behind the Christian message. And I don't think that takes away anything from the simplicity of the gospel either. But then there's this raw kind of simplicity at the core of like the human condition and human function. So anyways, all that to say, I just wanted to tee that up here and read some of the verses. And then I have two verses that I kind of pulled out scripturally that this made me think of. So verse 1, it says, I've been thinking about my Father lately, about the person he made me to be, or the person he made me, the person I've become, and I've been trying to fill all of this empty, but I'm still so empty. Yeah, I could use some love. This literally is in the lyrics here. And I've been trying to find a reason to get up, been trying to find a reason for this stuff. In my bedroom closet, in my bedroom and my closet, the baggage in my heart is still so dark. Man, like that gets to the core of like how we feel, just kind of like, in some cases, a lot of people feel daily like depression's a real thing, right? It's really always interesting to me. We have these social media, all across so many different social media platforms. And social media it was always intended to kind of make us more connected. But it's almost like, in a way, like the more connected we are with social media, the more disconnected we are from reality. Just a really interesting thing to take into account. So here's the chorus. Modern loneliness. We're never alone, but always depressed. Love my friends to death, but I never call and I never text them. Yeah, you get what you give and you give what you get. So modern loneliness. So what I loved about that is it goes from modern loneliness, this idea of loneliness, probably non-modern loneliness or traditional loneliness is you're isolated, you're separated away from people. But this idea of modern loneliness is that we're never alone. We're so connected. We have people all around us. But I've never been more depressed. Even though I have all these people around me, these people I'm supposed to have these connections with, I don't. And you see this all the time. People put on this face in the show for social media because they want to project this lifestyle or this happiness that they have because it's about the likes and it's about the FaceTime that you get. But the more FaceTime that you're putting out there that's not true to who you are, but then you put out true to who you are, like some of the things that you're struggling with and the suffering you're going through. And then oftentimes people can use it as just a ploy for more attention, first of all, or second of all, they put it out there and then people don't even want to engage with it. When it's raw and it's authentic, some people are just like, no, like unfollow, right? And what it really made me think of, like the Christian thing, right? And so I went to Colossians 3, and there's a verse starting in verse 11. It says this. It says, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarians, Scythian, bond nor free, but Christ is all in all. Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another, and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. Sorry, this is like the Old English version. So also do you forgive, pretty much. And above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also you are called in one body, and be thankful. This idea that there's no dividing lines anymore, right? There's no Jew, Greek, Gentile, Christian. There's nothing. There's just one, right? God is for all, and Christ came to save all, right? So in the measure that we cut ourselves off, and I think a lot of us do this implicitly in the modern age, we don't think that we're cutting somebody off, but our actions and our words dictate something completely contrary to the fact, right? If we're going to church every day on Sunday, but then the person who has less than we have, or the person who doesn't dress the way we dress, doesn't talk the way we talk, or God forbid, they're not colored the way that we're colored, all of a sudden we somehow stand off a little bit to them. Well, in essence, we're putting partiality between us and our brother, right? And that's what I think like Lauv, when he's writing that song, he's kind of getting at. We're around each other, but I've never felt more alone, more depressed. Nobody's wanting to look inside, deep inside my personal life, seeing where I'm at, and then elevating it. Think about this, verse 2. If I could break my DNA to pieces, rid all of my demons, if I could cleanse my soul, then I could fill the world with all my problems. But that wouldn't solve them. So I'm left here alone. It's the idea that, I could break my DNA into pieces, rid all of my demons. If I could cleanse my soul, like get it off my chest, I could put it into the world, but it doesn't solve the problem. So I'm left here being alone. And I did a video a while back about how individualism is killing Christian community. And I think this is the byproduct of it. This idea of this feeling of emptiness, this feeling like I can't get any connection, right? I can't get any connection. Nobody wants to actually look into what's really going on in my life, come alongside me and walk alongside me through life to help elevate my life. Like we are relational beings by nature. And one of the verses in the Old Testament, the story of Job, some of you may not know the story of Job, but he hits massive suffering. This is the thing about suffering. We're all going through suffering. And in fact, the Christian message doesn't say, oh, you're going to not have suffering. It actually presupposes that you're going to have suffering. Jesus talks about having suffering. It's not if you suffer, it's when you suffer. I heard it said once, there are only two types of people, right? Those who are going into a trial and those who are coming out of a trial. And that's the reality. So we're either going in or coming out. We might as well do it together, right? Suffering is a natural part of the human condition because through suffering, greater love and greater charity is born. Those are the times when we can really learn to come alongside somebody. And we take love in Corinthians, as 1 Corinthians 13 talks about. It's patient, it's kind, it's humble, it's not boastful. We take love in its purest form, willing the good of the other, as Aquinas has said. I think Thomas Aquinas has said. And so that's such a big part of the Christian thing. But anyways, I was going through Job, and there's this great part. I just got to read it. This is great. So starting in verse 6, this is chapter 2 in Job, and he says, the Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. He's talking to the Lord, right? So the Lord's telling Satan, very well then, he's in your hands. He's giving Satan like, hey, Job's in your hands, but you can do whatever you want to him, but spare his life, right? Gracious, awesome. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores, the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. His wife said to him, are you still maintaining your integrity? Go curse God and die. Be done with it, right? Imagine your wife coming to you and say, dude, you got that God thing, like curse him and get over it and go move on. Like you fell on all this famine. He allowed that to happen. Like point the blame, point the finger, this, that, and the other. So I said to him, he said, and he replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? So the point being, like God allows things to happen so we can come out of them stronger and more conformed to Christ. In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. And then here's the key part here. Verse 11, when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. These are his three best friends, let's call them, going to comfort Job and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. He'd been so wrecked from all the boils and the sores and all the famine and everything that's been falling upon him. He didn't even look like himself. They began to weep aloud and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. How many of you are willing to sit with someone for 7 days and 7 nights, not saying a word, and just being present, showing them that they're not alone in the suffering they're going through? You're not trying to solve the problem. You're not trying to figure out some solution. You're not saying, hey, cool, hey, here's a meal, go deal with your stuff, but I'm going to be over here in my happy land. I'm not going to deal with your suffering because I don't need that negativity in my life, right? There is something to be said about being present with people when they're in the midst of great suffering, because it's around those times where true community is fostered, true relationships are fostered. And you have this litany of stories all throughout history of this type of love, true love for our brothers coming into play. Going back to my friend, when we were talking about missionary in the slums, the only thing that I could think about of how you would mission to people or evangelize or share the gospel with people in that kind of predicament. It's not through words and intellectual argumentation. It's going to be through your actions. And the first person that came to mind was Mother Teresa, and how she ministered for years in the slums of Calcutta. And that's the Christian thing at its core, is when a heart is so aligned to God that it produces that kind of love, because the heart is conforming itself to Christ. So think about these lyrics one more time. Modern loneliness. We're never alone, but always depressed. Yeah, I love my friends to death, but I never call, never text them. Yeah, you get what you give and you get what you get. So modern loneliness. We love to get high, but we don't know how to come down. So my thoughts for the day, kind of pondering it. I know kind of a roundabout way to get to the crux of it. But if you know somebody who's kind of in the midst of great suffering, maybe this is kind of a time for God to prompt you, especially as we enter into Lent and we're moving through Lent. This is a great time for you to be able to come alongside that person. And maybe it's just a matter of being present. Maybe it's just a matter of encouraging them. Maybe it's just a matter of telling them, you know what, you've been in the midst of some great suffering, but God's got a purpose and a use for that suffering in your life if you allow him to use it. And I know it's not always what you want to hear, but at the end of your suffering, at the end of your trial, you'll come out of this a heck of a lot stronger when you look at it through God's eyes. So from all of us here at Practical Theism, definitely want to thank you for watching. Definitely hit that like button, pound that subscribe button like you mean it, so you can get more of this awesome content. Until next time, we'll talk to you then. Thanks.